Blessings, beloveds. Welcome back to my channel, Anastasia, Cosmic Astrologer with you guys. Wanting to give just some tips to those of you that are parents, actually. When we have an understanding of pretty much the dominant element, let's say, because that's what I'm going to be focusing on today. The elements is in earth, air, water, and fire in our children. It really aids us and really empowers us to understand how to understand our children better, how to nurture them better in terms of what their actual needs are. Now, of course, the fundamental needs of a growing child is pretty much the same for every child. However, there are some really core fundamental differences which can be very well understood just through the sheer understanding of the elements. So, for example, for today, for instance, really what I'm wanting you guys to understand and reflect on is the sun sign of your child, for instance. Now, naturally, we would build to this story, to this picture, to the life of your child through exploring all the other components within your child's birth chart. But at a very basic core level, understanding the nature of the element of their sun sign can be so incredibly useful in basically giving them what they need, what would foster and nurture their development and their growth on all levels, mentally, spiritually, emotionally, and so forth. So I will start by just making a few comments about the water element, and then I'll go through the rest of the elements as well. The thing to keep in mind, as I've said, this is a baseline which is incredibly powerful, because when we are talking about children, I'm talking about infants right through, even to teenage years, you could say, really. Certainly the first 7 years of life, because the first 7 years of life, and this is understood in the model of psychology as well, is that the first 7 years of life really shape an individual's life, for better or for worse. Now, that's not to say that later on in life, people can't transform and work on things and transcend and grow and develop. But there is something incredibly powerful that happens in the first 7 years of life that basically creates an internal reference point, a psychological template that informs a child of themselves, their caregivers, and the world at large, in terms of whether they feel safe or secure, or whether they have self-worth or self-esteem, whether they can express their emotions, whether they can be free in who they are. All those things are pretty much shaped and formed in the first 7 years. So if you have a child that's a water sign, so the water signs are the Cancer, Scorpio, and Pisces. Now, there is a difference with all the water signs, all the earth signs, the fire signs, and the air signs. They're very, very different in a lot of different ways, but the common thread that binds them is the element in terms of water, earth, etc. Water is water, earth is earth, air is air, and fire is fire. We can't change that. That is what it is. But certainly the signs, the different signs, have different expressions and functions of those elements as they continue to evolve and advance through the zodiac. Going back to the water element, the first water sign that we encounter is the sign of Cancer. So that's the first encounter of the emotional world, the emotional body, the experiences of feelings and emotions, period, which is another reason why Cancer is, can potentially be a much more insecure sign than Scorpio and Pisces, because it's really the birthing of emotions, the first encounter, experience of emotions. So it's a world that the child, you could say, hasn't quite formed a sense of security yet. They're really only just discovering this world of emotions, the realm of emotions, what that is, what that feels like, how it works, how they can express it, how they relate, how they share, all those things. So we must keep in mind naturally the different qualities or expressions of each of the water signs, each of the air signs, earth and fire signs. But nevertheless, if we just take this understanding just simply from the element itself, well, water is a very, very, all the elements are very powerful, but water is a very, very powerful element in life, period. Our bodies are made up of 80% of water or thereabouts. We have so much water on this earth plane. There's a sense of fluidity, which is movement, sense of fluid movement that we encounter and experience both within ourselves and the world external of us as well. I mean, the lunation cycle is a beautiful mirror or image of that fluid movement, that fluctuating element of water, hence why the water rules Cancer. So water is very much about security. When you have a little child who's a water sign, they have such an incredibly rich imagination. Their world is experienced predominantly from internally. They live inside themselves, as it were. So everything gets referenced back to how they are feeling. So their feelings need to be cultivated, nurtured, understood, embraced. You need to help them understand, and you also need to help them verbalize their emotions, because one thing water children really struggle to do, unless of course the parents are very conscious of making this effort to encourage the child to verbalize their emotions, the child will simply internalize their emotions, because most things are internal for them anyway. And they will be left with a sea of emotions, not really understanding or knowing what to even do with them. So water is the element that connects everything in life. Water is the element that has the ability to feel everything, to feel my own self, to feel the other person, to have that empathy and compassion and sensitivity. And water children are the most sensitive of all the elements. They are super, super, super sensitive little beings. And as a result of their sensitivity, because they absorb so much around them, particularly from their early environment and their primary caregivers, whether it's parents or somebody else that's raising them, they take cues very, very strongly from an emotional level. It's not a thought process, it's an emotional process that takes place. So, if aggression is directed at them, or if restraint is directed at them, or fear is projected onto them, things like that, they take it very deeply inside them and they churn it over and they process it, and at a very young age they don't quite understand what to do with it, so it just lies there as a residue, if you like. It lies dormant, and it starts to inform and create what they need to understand about life from that emotional level, because their primary filter about who they think they are, or how they feel about life and other people, is filtered through every single emotion that they experience. And they experience a lot of emotions because that's their primary mode of operation. Everything is filtered through the emotional body. Now, Cancer is different to Scorpio, and Scorpio is different to Pisces. As I said at the very beginning, we must be able to understand those archetypes as well in the form of the element that they represent. So water children, they're like little psychic sponges, basically. They walk around being incredibly impressionable, to what they witness, what they are subjected to. And it's not only what they see and hear, it's also just the vibe, the sense that they get. So if you have a child who's a water sign and there's an environment that they're in that's really aggressive, that's really dismissive of their feelings, all that sort of stuff. Or even if it's just an environment where there's a lot of toxicity and, adults are arguing all the time, and there's a lot of aggression expressed, the water child is going to just soak that up like a vacuum cleaner. It's going to absorb it all, take it all in. And because they are at that age, they don't know how to discriminate and discern what actually belongs to them and what actually doesn't. So they just hold it within them. This is another reason why water children need to be encouraged to express their emotions so that they can have a form of release and expression for what's going on in their internal world. Obviously, they're incredibly intuitive, incredibly sensitive. Their internal world is incredibly rich, as I said. They can be very psychic, very impressionable, because they, as a result of being so impressionable, they literally absorb everything. So, parents sometimes think, my child is too young to even understand what's going on between myself and my husband, for instance, or myself and whoever else I live with or cohabit with, etc. But it's the water child, this is the really important point to understand. The water child doesn't need to understand it from a mental perspective because they actually don't. Anyway, what they do is they feel the vibration of what's in the environment. So even if you're having an argument in the other room, not necessarily in front of your child, that water child is just going to pick every single little increment, every little thing that's flying around. That child is just going to soak it all up. And that can leave them obviously feeling quite insecure, quite threatened. It creates a lot of uncertainty within them. It destabilizes their security. The water and earth elements are the two elements that really, really, really need security. Emotional security for the water and physical stability and security for the earth signs. So, a water child is, they are the poet, the dreamer. They are the little child who will have conversations with invisible, imaginary friends. And I don't believe that they are really imaginable. I think it's just because of their receptivity and because of how impressionable they are and how psychic they are. The ego hasn't fully formed in a child, has it? Because the ego develops, pretty much right through, infancy, childhood, and teenage years as well. Really, the ego is forming and developing all the way through those years. So you can imagine, when you're talking about a small child, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, there's practically no ego there, usually speaking. So a water child, they don't have the ego defenses, to kind of create those boundaries and protect themselves. And that's one other thing about water. Water doesn't have boundaries. It's boundless, really. As a result, it soaks everything up and absorbs everything in. Now, that can be incredibly damaging to a child who's so influenced by the water element, that's so super sensitive and is just soaking up things from its environment that are really toxic for him or her. They are very, very emotionally intelligent. When they meet a person, even at a very young age, they can make an accurate evaluation very, very quickly about a person. Because they just, there's no boundaries there, so there's nothing filtering. It's just the emotional sort of the ocean or the emotional realm body is just fully, completely open. So it just connects. It connects to vibration. It connects to energy. It connects to the feelings that are floating around in the ether. So a small child will not only pick up from their immediate environment, but they'll also pick up from the collective too. That's another level. If they are consistently exposed to negativity and toxicity and things of that nature, that starts to become a part of them. It starts to inform their perspective of reality, which is not a good thing. So, I'm not saying wrap your kids up in cotton wool, because they do need to experience life and be exposed to the different components that life has to offer and present in terms of learning and growing and things of that nature. But the main thing is to really nurture their emotional side in a really positive, healthy way, where they can learn how to utilize that beautiful skill and quality, empathy and compassion, in a way that's really positive for them, as opposed to it being fearful, where it gets suppressed and then later on it gets projected onto their adult relationships and so forth. If you are feeling really angry with your kid, because parents do get annoyed with their children, totally understandable, the aggression that you may express, whether it's just, telling them off. When I say aggression, I'm not speaking of severe aggression. I'm speaking of, having a little moment where you just tell your kid to, just stop doing that. Stop doing that. I need you to just stop and put that away, and, maybe go to your room and read your book, or however it is you parent. I don't know. The point being that when you express that moment of disapproval, you could say, be mindful to not go on about it, because the water children, they get it very quickly. They don't need this reinforcement to understand that you're not happy with them, because their sensitivity is so sharp. They know by the way you just look at them, let alone what you actually verbalize. So highly sensitive beings that really need to be understood and nurtured from that emotional level. And as I said, the healthiest thing you can do about that is to help them understand their own emotions and help them develop the rational mind, if you like, so that they can find a way to articulate and verbalize their feelings. If they don't learn how to do that at an early age, they will struggle later on in life, which will become a real problem in interpersonal skills and relationships and things of that nature. And in addition to that, when they are, if a deep sense of insecurity starts to build up within them, they will ultimately they'll start to feel undermined, as they continue to grow, and they can develop really, as adults, they can develop really sort of compulsive behaviors that relate to that emotion within that hasn't been positively expressed and actively expressed. It's just been suppressed and internalized and made them feel bad about themselves in some kind of way. So they're very, very sensitive little creatures, and it's very, very helpful to really pay attention to this if you've got whether it's a girl or a boy. Certainly, there are different mechanisms in boys than there are in girls. The basic meaning and energy of water is still the same. It's clearly, though, the feminine, being a girl, for instance, she may be perhaps more in touch with it, more open with expressing, her sadness or her tears and, crying and so forth, whereas boys might be a little bit more reluctant, depending on what sort of father figure they have and what they've been taught on that level as well. If they've been sort of given the permission, if you like, to, to express their emotions on a number of different streams that can come through. So water babies are the most sensitive out of all the elements, and they can be the most damaged, in my opinion, if they grow up in a toxic environment where there's different sorts of behaviors going on that really don't foster or nurture their emotional side, and where they don't learn to frame and understand a healthy perspective of their emotional nature. Instead, they can be led to feel insecure and undermined and bad about feeling things, so they'll just hide it and internalize it. Now, water signs are very, very private anyway. They will hide a lot of things, especially when it comes to Scorpio, but all the water signs do, and it's not even so much hiding as much as it is that they live so much within, in the internal sort of world. They can have, their imagination is so powerful and so rich, they can create an entire world, inside them with how they feel. The other thing about water that's really important to remember and understand is that water always connects to the past, as in the past experiences that they've had in this life, and you can even extend that further and say past life experiences as well. But even if you were not to include that, and you just understand it from this lifetime, a child who has a difficult upbringing, who's a water sign, who wasn't emotionally nurtured and loved and cared for and understood and all of that, they have a very strong emotional memory, and everything is kind of suppressed, if you like, hidden in this emotional component of their body, and they will suppress it and keep it down there until something happens in adult life that triggers that memory. And when it triggers that memory, it can be actually very traumatic. The thing is that water loves to live in the past. It's just the nature of water. So it would be really, really horrible for a water sign child that grows into an adult that has had to try and cut themselves off from memories of the past because the past was so bad. And that would make them feel so disconnected, really, because the past is so important to the water sign. It's another thing to keep in mind. Naturally, if there's an overwhelming water element in the birth chart, such as that the child has their moon and their ascendant in the water element as well, and so forth, that clearly adds to everything I've just said in a multiple of ways, and makes the person so sensitive. Sometimes that because the sensitivity is so it can be so raw and so difficult to deal with when the child is not shown the right ways or the right tools or the appropriate care. The child, will suppress and disconnect so much so as an adult that they can completely cut themselves off in a way. But they don't really do that totally, because water, and this is a quote by Rob Hand, which I really love, water is the element that, because it's so connected to the feelings and the emotions, water signs need to feel something. So if it means feeling bad, they will opt for that than not feel anything at all. Water just needs to feel, period. So I'll leave the water element there for now, and I'll move on to the next element. I might just go to Earth to kind of follow a bit of a sequence. Okay, so the Earth element belongs to the sign of Taurus, Virgo, and Capricorn. Now, the Earth signs are similar to the water in the sense where security is a primary need for Earth signs, but it's not so much an emotional security. It's a security of feeling protected and safe on this Earth plane, really. So the practical nature of the Earth signs is the dominant characteristic of feature of how they operate and how they filter through everything. Virgo and Capricorn really struggle with abstractions, aesthetic sort of components of life, Taurus, not so much, because it's ruled by Venus, so that the Taurus naturally is going to be very, very connected to beauty and art and things of that nature. But its primary driving force is going to be about security. Taurus is, about my possessions and what I can create and accomplish and achieve on the material plane, and how much of that I can have, and I want more, and then I've got that, and then I want more again. And no matter how much they have, they still want more. So there's this forever sort of desire, if you like, with the Taurus nature to want to collect as much as they can from that material level. The greatest thing about the earth signs, even as little children, is that they can be really, really practical, really reliable, really sensible. They're very grounded little people. So they need to be. It's important to help them develop through discipline. They don't shy away from discipline. They naturally adapt themselves to that. And in fact, they need it because they're just so practical. They can be very difficult to move, to shift into a different understanding, because the earth signs are the salt of the earth, right? They are literally anchored to this earth plane. They are incredibly grounded. So little kids who are, any of those three earth signs, they really need to be cultivated in skills and in practical environments that enable them to cultivate these practical skills. They need to understand and see why, A connects to B and C connects to D. As I said, that they're not abstract thinkers, so they really need to see the practical, realistic whys and hows of how and why things work. They will not be persuaded into a different way of looking at things, because they need hard sort of proof. They need evidence. They need to be able to see it with their eyes to understand why this works like that, and why that connects to so and so, etc. They are very, very powerful in self-control. This is a great quality they have. So even if their environment changes in the most peculiar ways or the most challenging ways, they will be the signs or element that will be able to control themselves in the environment and somehow work with that environment. I'm talking about the external environment, not what's happening internally. Just a really powerful ability to control themselves on that level. They have a very solid sense of reality, if you like. These are all very great qualities. Virgo is very critical. Capricorn is very ambitious, and Taurus is very possessive with their possessions. So the earth children need to feel grounded, connected to the earth, and need to have structure in their life. If they don't have these elements present, they can feel incredibly insecure and incredibly just sort of thrown all over the shop. They don't have that stability, that ground point that they need to be able to create in that physical way. Naturally, if there is too much earth in the chart, the deficiency that would sort of show, if you like, would be an inability to be inflexible, to let go of things, to embrace change, because earth signs don't like change. They just primarily want stability and security. The good thing about children who are earth signs is that you can really get them working on things, working on projects, working on their skills. They're very motivated to do those things. They love it. They enjoy it. So if you can find what it is that they are drawn to, or that appeals to them. I mean, certainly as children, it will be more around, just having routine and stability, and certainly being able to play outside with nature, to connect with the earth. Something of which a lot of children, they don't get that much of it. I remember when I was growing up, I was outside all the time. I'm not an earth sign, but I do have Mars in Capricorn. And I'm a fire sign, so I needed a lot of freedom. I'll get onto that when I get onto fire. I think it's important actually for all children to have the opportunity to connect with earth and with nature, regardless of the element. But what it will do is very different things depending on what element your child is. So if it's a water element child we're talking about, connecting with earth and nature will help them sort of feel more grounded, more anchored to the earth, if you like, because the water babies, they can be so lost in their imagination, if you like, and so they can sit in their room, for instance, for hours and hours and hours, and not talk to anybody and not see anybody. And if that's operating on a fairly healthy level, that can be okay. That can be something that they actually really enjoy. But ideally, it's not the way to go, because you want your children to engage with nature and with life. The earth signs don't need a lot of encouragement with that, because they naturally feel connected to the earth, which is another reason why they need to have access to being outside, to playing, to creating things, to getting their hands in the mud, in the dirt, and just having those experiences. And, a lot of what I see and hear is, since the world of technology becoming so dominant in our world, the majority of children are, they're tech heads. They spend most of their time on their notepads, computers, video games, etc. And there's an incredible, it's almost an epidemic, if you like. That's a bit extreme, but it seems to be a real problem, that children are not, it's almost like, and I'm not saying that every parent is like this, and I would never make that assumption about anybody. I'm just speaking in general terms, in terms of what is reflected through different discussions that people are having, or different educational programs, or whatever it may be. It seems to me that a lot of parents do find it very, very easy to just buy their child a computer, and the child can be entertained on that all day and all night. And that kind of gets the parent, gives the parent the space to kind of deal with everything else that they have to deal with. So I understand the easiness of that and the temptation of that, but I also understand what the dysfunction that it can create in the child, in terms of the fantasy world that can ultimately establish and create just through sitting in their room on a computer. That's a real problem with the air signs as well, because, well, it can be, not necessarily, because actually I take that back, because air signs are more inclined to be outdoors, and I'll explain why in a moment. Just want to see if I have left anything out. Yes, so earth signs, they have a very strong backbone. Now, that's a very interesting statement, because the backbone, or you could say the entire skeletal system, is ruled by Saturn. So earth signs are very influenced by Saturn, not so much Taurus, and we know Mercury rules Virgo, but we can say that Saturn really has an overall influence of all the earth signs, because they are earth signs. And because they are affected or influenced by the energy of Saturn, which is earth energy, this is where they can get really stuck on things and be inflexible and fearful as well of exploring and being adventurous. Now, exploration and adventure is more associated with the air and fire signs. So you can see there's a lot of similarities between the earth and the water, but the primary needs are very different. Water needs emotional support, care, and earth needs practical care and stability, very simply put. So if those things are absent for the earth child or the water child, that can really turn things upside down for them as they grow into an adult. And it can bring about a number of different issues, which are very complex, and I'm not going to unpack other than the comments I've already made. With regards to the water, it's all about the emotional body and the relationships that they subsequently form in adulthood, where there's dysfunction in their ability to feel okay about themselves and feel okay about expressing their emotions, period. And with earth, it's the sense of insecurity that can rise within them if they don't have that stable environment as a child growing up. So an example would be if an earth child is transported to, different locations, the parents are moving from house to house to house, to state to country. There's a lot of instability in that. Now, the fire and air signs will adapt to that quite quickly. Whilst I said the earth can control themselves in the different environments that they find themselves in, they still can feel a deep sense of insecurity because it just doesn't feel stable for them. Okay, air. So air children are incredibly inquisitive. Well, first of all, it's Gemini, Libra, Aquarius we're talking about. So these kids, they have an abundance of ideas, and they're very interesting to talk to. Very intelligent, very witty, very quick with their mind. Mercury and Uranus are mainly the planets that would connect to the air signs. Venus rules Libra, as we know, so therefore you could say Venus has a bit of an air quality to her as well for that reason. So the air signs are the rational kids. They're the kids that are going to be able to be more objective and more rational, and far less emotional, if at all. If there's a lot of air in your child's chart, then the very thing you need to be paying attention to is how to develop the emotional body in them, so that they don't try and rationalize every single thing about life, because what that ends up doing is it doesn't leave them the space to experience their emotions, because all they'll do is just try and rationalize every single feeling they have. On a positive, they don't allow their emotions to color the rational understanding and perspective of reality as well. So they're very, very objective. They need a lot of freedom. They need freedom. It's a freedom that they need in their mind, which then extends to their immediate environment as well. So they need to move around. They're connectors as well, but they're mental connectors. So they need to be expressing and communicating their ideas and sharing their thoughts, and just learning, learning from other people, learning from their environment, learning at school, learning by, people sharing things with them and so forth. And they have a need to communicate all these different thoughts and ideas. So if you're not a big communicator, and your husband isn't, and your child is trying to share all these thoughts and ideas with you, and you're shutting them down all the time, that's clearly going to give them the message that it's not okay to be communicating their ideas, really. So that can create problems. Emotions never distort their thinking. They live in the world of ideas. They excel with abstract subjects. So these are the guys that can be brilliant at science, astrology, maths, things of that nature, and many, many other subjects. They're fascinated by the world of problems, mental problems. So they are the ones that can sit there and be very, very determined in finding answers and solutions. They're very good at that. The downside of too much air going on where, the child's living in their head a lot with their ideas is that they can be very disconnected from their emotions. Not only their own emotions, but that then extends to understanding the feelings and emotions of others. So they can lack empathy, the air signs, for instance, because air is not about empathy. It's really just about the rational, logical world of ideas and concepts and understanding everything from that conceptual mental sphere. Now, it's certainly very different in Gemini, Libra, and Aquarius. In Gemini, it's really the interest and curiosity in absolutely everything. The Gemini kid will be the one in the home that will just probably be the biggest chatterbox, the most curious, the most inquisitive, asking you questions about everything. Why did you do that in that way? And why does that work like that? And what does that mean? And, it's question after question after question after question. And they're not even interested in the answer, because as you start to answer, they'll be on to the next question. That's just the nature of Gemini. It's such a large world of curiosity that they don't have enough time to wait, which is why they have this sort of sense of urgency to go on to the next thought, the next idea, the next question. It's just an abundance of ideas. And that can be wonderful, but it can also be, it can make them a little bit scattered at times and find it difficult to stay with one thing long enough to really learn something about it. That's the downside to it. This can apply to adults as well. So the air sign little children, they really need to be encouraged with communicating their thoughts and ideas and sharing them and learning what they're learning about, and, allowing them to be inquisitive and, have all their little questions and things they want to ask. It's the air signs live very much by their rational beliefs of what they think they believe. And it's predominantly related to what's right and wrong, which really derives from Gemini, because Gemini is the one sign that splits everything. That's why it's the twins. So Gemini very much has this filter or perception of right and wrong, and it divides things as well. So it's interesting. Air signs are the people, little children even, that can be very, very persuasive with their opinions, and they can change the opinions of an adult even. They have so much persuasion in the verbalization of language, and because they're so intelligent, and the energy is predominantly up here in the conceptual sphere, they operate from the world of ideas, so they're incredibly persuasive, which is another reason why Librans, for example, they make brilliant lawyers, in the courtroom, to be able to stand in a courtroom and represent somebody, depending on which area of the law you're working in, of course, but, let's just say it was criminal law and you're representing a client who's been alleged to have committed a particular crime that is, pretty unacceptable, right? Just to put it simply. It's not your job to make a judgment of whether you like or dislike what this allegation is, but it is your job to represent this person from a legal point of view, objectively, in an unbiased fashion. Now, Librans are remarkable at doing that, or people with Mercury in Libra even, actually. So the air signs have the gift of the gab, is another way of saying it. You know, they can influence and persuade a lot of people. Okay, the fire signs. Just what would be a deficiency? You could say if there was a lot of air in your child's chart and they were lacking water, they had no water, you'd be really paying attention to that, because the quality of empathy and compassion and feelings would be very challenged for them to understand. That's probably the best way to describe it, actually. Too much air is the inability to understand the world of feelings. So, for instance, when a child is amongst other children, and let's just say that two children just have an argument and they start crying or something like that, get very upset, the air sign child is just going to rationalize the whole scenario and not get emotional about it at all, try and find a mental solution, which is great. But then at the same time, it's that inability to accept other people's emotions and how they feel, because the main reason that they struggle with that is because they don't understand it. It's not something that's built within them, which is why we need to learn as parents when we've got a child who's predominantly acting through the air element. We need to find a way to engage them with the emotional world, even if it's just through our emotions and us expressing our emotions to this child and helping them understand their own sort of emotions through that dialogue. It's whatever is lacking in the chart, that is the point that needs to be sort of really understood or worked on or developed more consciously. So air is about freedom, earth is about security, water is about security, and fire is about freedom as well, naturally. Fire even more than air, because air, you know, they can literally just live in their mind, in their mind of ideas, you know, so they could just sit down and they could read several chapters of a book and be very content doing that. Anything that's enabling them to engage their mind, essentially. Just a couple of other things. I might go back just to the previous two elements. Earth and water is very often connected to the experience of depression. And air is often connected to the experience of anxiety. And fire probably would be anxiety as well. So you could say earth and water are more prone to depression. Fire and air are more prone to anxiety. I'll explain why in a moment. But just getting back to the fire, which is Aries, Leo, and Sagittarius. So these kids, they are free-spirited little children. You know, they are the ones that have an abundance of energy. They're the little firecrackers running around in the room. You can't even catch them. I remember when I'm a fire sign, a sun sign Aries, and I used to be a really fast runner, really like a sprinting style. And I was incredibly active. In fact, I still am, even at my age now. But when I was very little, apparently I used to run so fast that when my dad used to say my name, by the time he finished saying my name, I had actually disappeared. I had vanished. I used to run so fast. So the fire signs need that environment out there to be really super active. The fire signs are Aries, Leo, and Sag, and the planets mostly associated with the fire signs is the Sun, Mars, and Jupiter. So they're fiery sort of planets, if you like. Fire is about adventure. They need the space and freedom to run out there and explore things. They need to be able to express their courage and their will forces. Will is probably one of the best kind of words for fire, really. It's that desire to literally experience everything, from that level of being totally fearless, really. They are the kids that will jump the fences, that will, knock things over, that will push things out the way, that will show tremendous courage from that external physical level and tremendous will. You can't stop them, and I wouldn't recommend trying to stop them because that is their very nature. They are the ones also that will have anger outbursts, but the anger outbursts are interesting in fire children because it'll last for about 3 seconds. And then once they've calmed down, you can actually walk back up to them and have a conversation with them, and they'll just be totally normal. Because fire, it just needs to express. Once it comes out, it's out, and it's done and dusted. That's generally how fire operates. They're not the signs that, brood over things. They don't hold things inside. Fire is about external movement. It's that fire energy just moving, constantly moving externally out there. They'll be probably the most challenging to discipline, really, because they don't like discipline. They don't like authority. They will rebel against what appears to be restrictive, So if a fire kid has parents that are really Saturnian, I feel sorry for him or her. But this is why I'm doing this video, just to kind of give a few tips to people, because you may be a parent who has a young child, or you may be thinking of having children, or you may even have older children. Even just understanding these components can be very helpful in understanding how to relate to your children. What do they really need to feel sort of validated and accepted and understood? And the way to understand that is through their element predominantly. Fire signs are, you'll always know what they're doing and where they're at, because they are the most upfront, forthright, honest people. It's not a conscious thing. It's not like they sit there and think, I have to say the truth about this. They just are. They just come out with it. They're very direct. Sagittarius, can be so honest that they are, they are the ones that can put their foot in their mouth, because they just, they have this burning desire to speak truths, and that can be at the expense of somebody who's, say, very sensitive, for instance. And like a very simple, mundane example, a Sag guy is married to a Pisces woman, and she comes out of the room. They're about to go to dinner, and she says to him, what do you think about this dress? Do you think it looks good on me? And he turns around and he says, oh, that looks absolutely terrible on you. No, get it off. Now, the Pisces, that's going to be like almost soul crushing to her. That's how sensitive the water signs are. That's not how you deal with a water sign. You can give constructive criticism with a lot more sensitivity and empathy, but fire signs usually won't do that. Earth signs don't really do that either, for that matter. Earth signs can be very, very critical, especially Virgo. Very critical. Now, the fire element is that because they're such free-spirited creatures, and they need to be free and moving around and, just exploring their territory, and they'll be the ones that be really excited about, going out and playing and jumping off trees and, skateboards and bikes and all that sort of stuff. And they are the ones that will injure themselves the most as well, because they're not careful. They're just like you can't hold fire babies back. They're just full force, fully active in everything they're doing. But they might hurt themselves, but they get up very quickly. They bounce back very quickly. And that's another reason why when they have their little fire tantrum, they'll express it and it's off their chest, so to speak, and then they can just move on. That's what fire signs do. That's what's great about fire energy. Whereas the water element, you could say something to a 4 or 5-year-old child that's a water sign that really was not consciously intended to hurt them, but because they're so sensitive, you've said something that's offended them so deeply, they might carry that for the rest of their life, literally. This is how different the water and fire operate. This is why it's really great to understand just the elements in your children. Now, water signs are emotional, but they're not emotional in the way that I just described with the water sign. You say something to a water sign person and they hold it to the death. Very difficult to let go of that. The fire signs, they feel very passionate, about their feelings. So when they're very emotional about something, it's more coming through their passion. It's not about being moody and being hurt in that way as a water sign child would. The other great thing about the fire signs is because they have such an incredible sense of willpower, will forces, they'll fight for themselves. They won't take a lot of shit in the schoolyard. I'm not saying they'll be bullies, although that can potentially happen, but that depends on a number of different factors that would cultivate that kind of behavior. But just in terms of defending themselves, the fire child, will not take shit. If a kid goes up to him and tries to bully him or give him some shit or push him over, the fire kid will get up and probably smash the shit out of him. Well, yeah. Fire kids are very passionate and very strong-willed, and they're fighters. They're literally fighters, and they'll fight for other people as well. They're true sort of warrior energy, spirit type of people, and even as adults that is the case as well. So they're the kind of characteristics in a nutshell, really, of the different elements. So if you've got a child who is either water, air, fire, or water, or earth, sorry, have a think about the comments that I've just made. You may be very familiar with a lot of these comments because you've already studied some astrology, which is great, but it's important to try and understand these qualities from the point of view of a small child and what their primary needs will be as a result of the primary element dominating their little life. And as I said at the beginning of the video, what you would do after that is you would look at, what is their moon sign? What is their ascendant? Naturally those things are going to color and filter other components of your child. The other thing that's really important as well is the qualities, and maybe I'll just do a separate video. Yeah, I'll do a separate video on that. But the qualities, which are the fixed, cardinal, and mutable, when you add that dimension to the elements, you really start to gain even more insight into how this kid operates. Understanding the elements and the qualities is going to help you understand your kid beyond what any psychologist or therapist will probably ever tell you, or a school counselor or whatever. Because in terms of a traditional psychologist or therapist, they don't work with the model of astrology, so they don't even consider most of what we've discussed today. So they will focus more on the model of, is there stability in the home, is there consistency, what sort of communication styles do you have, etc., etc., which is important and necessary and wonderful too, and useful. But once you start to add the richness of astrology, just in terms of the elements and the qualities, you start to get a larger window, a larger view on how your child is operating and why, and what they actually need to really help them grow to the best version of themselves, to help them feel empowered in their life as opposed to disempowered. To help them draw out the best virtues and qualities that they would really excel in. There's no use trying to get a fire sign child, into, let's just say, as their children, I don't know, a ballet class or a art class, where they kind of just connect more to the aesthetic abstract world. You're kind of forcing, a square, what is it? What's that saying? A square in I've just forgotten it. But anyway, you're trying to put something in an environment that just doesn't have a natural affinity with it. And then what happens is the child starts to feel bad about themselves because they're not performing at the level that is expected. And it's not because they can't necessarily, but it's more because they're not interested in that. They don't really have a natural affinity with it. So they don't really understand it, and they don't even want to. So, and you might have the best sort of motivations for wanting them to pursue that path, but it's more about what you want, not about what they want. So this is why it helps to understand, what are the different needs of the children based on the elements and the qualities, what would serve them better, what would really help them flourish and grow and become, more conscious and evolve to a truer path that's true for them, that's authentic for them, as opposed to what we think we want for them. So I hope this was useful if you haven't considered these points before. And yeah, it's really, really hot here today, guys. I hope you're all doing really well. It's 25th of January, and I'll be back soon with an update for February, actually. There's some, things changing and going on. I wonder how you're all feeling after the 2 eclipses we've had this month. It's been pretty life-changing for a lot of people around me, both on a personal and professional level. It's been very interesting to observe that and to also help people. So yeah, I'll be back soon with a Feb update, and sending you all much love and blessings, and thank you so much for your comments and questions, and your appreciation. And if you're new to my channel, thanks for watching, and subscribe if you like my work and appreciate it. Share with your friends, all that sort of stuff. If you want a private personal consultation with me, there's many different types of readings I offer, depending on what you need as well. Also children's charts, so today was a topic of children. So, sometimes it can be really useful to understand your child's birth chart. Can just give you so much insight, which can really help flourish and foster and nurture the best for them that could really serve them on their path. So see you guys very soon. Much love and blessings. Bye for now.